Why is it that some people pass through life without close friends? At first, it seems like a simple social problem, but Carl Jung warned us that such loneliness is never a mere accident. Behind the silence of an empty social life hides a message from the unconscious, a symbol that demands our attention. What if having no friends is not about rejection at all, but about something deeper the soul is trying to reveal? Stay with me, because as we unfold this idea, you may begin to see loneliness in a way you never imagined. Before we go deeper, make sure to subscribe to my channel SYC Soul, like this video, hit the notification bell so you don't miss upcoming insights, and share this with someone who may need it. When the noise of daily life fades, and a person is left only with their own thoughts, the question becomes unavoidable. Why do some people have no friends at all? From the outside, it may appear as emptiness or even failure. Yet Jung reminded us that outer life is always a mirror of inner life. The absence of friendships is not random. It is a symbol of something stirring in the unconscious. For some, it is the echo of past wounds that created invisible walls, pushing others away without them even realizing it. For others, it is a natural withdrawal from a world that feels too chaotic, too shallow, too noisy. And for a few, it is a silent search for authenticity, a refusal to settle for connections that lack truth. In all these cases, solitude is not only emptiness, it is a window. Through that window, we glimpse not just fears and scars, but also hidden capacities that can, over time, transform into profound gifts. From a Jungian perspective, loneliness is not an error in life's design, it is a language. A private message from the unconscious urging us to pause, to look inward, and to confront what we have ignored or buried within ourselves. Perhaps this absence of friends is not meant to break us, but to guide us toward the most essential connection of all, the relationship with the self. And here lies a question worth carrying forward. If loneliness is not punishment, then what new path might it be preparing us to walk? If loneliness is not punishment, then what is it preparing us for? This is where Carl Jung's insights become strikingly clear. He explained that the psyche never leaves us without guidance. When we find ourselves cut off from friends, it is often the unconscious attempting to redirect our attention inward, forcing us to encounter aspects of ourselves that we might otherwise avoid. Think about it. When you have no one to constantly distract you, when the usual social voices are silent, what remains? Only you, face to face with your own inner world. This confrontation can feel uncomfortable, even frightening, because it demands that we meet the shadow, those parts of our personality we prefer to hide. Yet Jung believed that without such encounters, true growth cannot occur. So, could it be that having no friends is the psyche's way of creating space for transformation? Solitude becomes the stage upon which the inner drama unfolds. In this space, repressed fears, forgotten desires, and neglected strengths rise to the surface. While society may label a person as lonely, Jung would remind us that loneliness is often the very soil in which individuality and self-knowledge take root. But here's the curious twist. Those who walk this path often don't realize its deeper meaning until much later. At first, they may feel abandoned, rejected, or unworthy. Yet, as time passes, they begin to sense something stirring beneath the silence. The absence of external company reveals the presence of an inner companion, an archetypal force that calls them to awaken. This is why Jung never dismissed loneliness as a trivial matter. He saw it as an archetypal experience, one that can push a person toward wholeness. Solitude, in this sense, is not about being cut off from others. It is about being called closer to the deepest layers of the self. So the question we must ask is this: when a person has no friends, are they truly empty? Or are they being prepared for a journey that few have the courage to take? And if so, what hidden discoveries might lie ahead for those who endure this silence? What hidden discoveries might lie ahead for those who endure this silence? Carl Jung would answer: the discovery of the true self. He often reminded us that modern life is so full of noise, distraction, and social masks that people rarely meet their own authentic being. Friendlessness, though painful, strips away those distractions and forces a person to confront what is real within them. Consider how most friendships are shaped. Many are built on shared convenience, fleeting interests, or even the subtle fear of being alone. But when these ties do not form at all, the individual is left in an unusual position. They are not shaped by the expectations of a close circle. Instead, they are left alone with the deeper call of the psyche. Jung would say that this absence of connection is not always loss. It can be liberation. Yet this liberation is not simple. It demands courage, because solitude exposes us to our own hidden contradictions. A person without friends may begin to notice the masks they once wore to be accepted. They may realize how often they betrayed their own truth just to fit in. The unconscious, through loneliness, removes the comfortable illusions and leaves only the bare self. And though this can feel terrifying, it is also the path toward authenticity. Here is the paradox Jung uncovered. Those who lack friends may actually be closer to discovering wholeness than those who are surrounded by endless social ties. Why? Because without the constant pull of external validation, they have the chance to develop inner strength, self-awareness, and even wisdom that others rarely cultivate. Solitude becomes not just emptiness, but initiation. Still, we must not romanticize this too quickly. The journey is demanding, and many resist it. To sit alone, to face one's own thoughts, to acknowledge fears without escape, this is not easy. And yet, as Jung would insist, the very difficulty is what makes the transformation possible. So ask yourself this: could the absence of friends in a person's life be the sign of a deeper calling, one that points not outward but inward? And if so, how many of us truly have the courage to accept that call? How many of us truly have the courage to accept that call? Carl Jung understood that very few people willingly embrace solitude. Most of us run from it, filling our lives with distractions, shallow relationships, or endless activity. We fear what we might discover in the silence. Yet for those who cannot escape their loneliness, those who, for whatever reason, find themselves without friends, there is no choice but to face it. And in that confrontation, something extraordinary begins. Loneliness strips away illusions, but it also awakens inner resources. Jung noted that when the external world offers no companionship, the psyche often compensates by drawing energy from within. A person may begin to notice dreams with greater intensity, creative impulses that emerge without warning, or sudden insights about their own life. What seemed at first like emptiness slowly reveals itself as a deeper form of presence. This is not to say the path is comfortable. On the contrary, it often begins with despair. The absence of friends can feel like exile, a painful reminder of separation. But Jung would urge us to see beyond the pain. Exile can also be initiation, the beginning of a journey into the unexplored regions of the self. He compared such experiences to mythic trials, where the hero must leave behind the familiar world and step into the unknown. And here lies a striking thought. Could those who live without friends actually be undergoing a kind of modern hero's journey, one that unfolds not on battlefields or in distant lands, but within their own psyche? If so, then their solitude is not meaningless. It is the testing ground of the soul. The question then is not merely, why do some people have no friends? But what are they being prepared to discover? This shift in perspective changes everything. Instead of seeing friendlessness as failure, we begin to recognize it as a signpost, pointing toward the depths of the unconscious. And yet, another mystery remains. If loneliness is a path to inner discovery, does it eventually lead us back to others, or is it a journey meant to be walked alone forever? Does the journey of loneliness eventually lead us back to others, or is it meant to be walked alone forever? Jung's answer was subtle. He believed that solitude is never the final destination. but rather a stage in the process of individuation, the lifelong task of becoming who we truly are. Friendlessness, then, is not meant to trap us in isolation forever. Instead, it is a crucible, shaping us until we are ready to meet others from a place of authenticity rather than need. In other words, loneliness is not the end of connection, but its transformation. Those who endure it often emerge with a new kind of strength, one that allows them to build relationships that are deeper, truer, and freer than before. Without the desperate hunger for validation, a person can finally choose friends not out of fear of being alone, but out of genuine resonance. Jung described this as the ability to relate to others without losing oneself. Think about the difference. Many people surround themselves with friends, yet feel empty, because their connections are built on masks. The one who has walked through solitude, however, learns to live without masks. When they do connect, the bond carries a weight of authenticity that ordinary friendships rarely achieve. But the paradox remains, this gift is not easily won. To reach it, one must first endure the silence of having no friends at all. Jung compared such periods to the dark night of the soul, where everything familiar falls away, leaving only uncertainty. Yet it is within this darkness that light eventually appears. And so, the absence of friends may actually be the preparation for the possibility of true friendship. Not the shallow companionship of convenience, but the meeting of souls who recognize each other beyond roles and masks. Still, we must ask, if loneliness is part of a larger psychological process, why does it choose some people and not others? Why are certain individuals pushed into this path of solitude, while others seem to move easily through social life? The answer, Jung suggested, lies deep in the structure of the psyche itself. Why are some individuals pushed into the path of solitude, while others seem to thrive easily in social circles? Carl Jung believed the answer lies deep in the unique structure of each psyche. He explained that the unconscious does not treat all people the same. For some, the task of life is to develop in relationship with others. For others, the task is to withdraw, to listen inwardly, and to cultivate the depths of the self before any meaningful connection can occur. This is why certain people, despite their best efforts, find themselves repeatedly without close friends. It is not always rejection from the outside. It is often an inner demand. The psyche knows what it needs, and for some, it insists on solitude. To resist this can create even more suffering, but when accepted, it can open the way to transformation. Jung noted that solitude often signals a confrontation with archetypes, those universal patterns of human experience that live in the collective unconscious. For example, the archetype of the hermit or the wise old man often appears in myths as a figure who withdraws from society to gain insight. Could it be that those who find themselves friendless are, in a sense, living out this archetypal role? If so, then their loneliness is not a flaw but a calling. This perspective changes everything. Instead of asking, "What is wrong with me that I have no friends?" one begins to ask, "What is life asking me to learn through this?" That shift, Jung argued, is the beginning of healing. It transforms despair into purpose. Of course, the challenge is enormous. Living without friends can bring waves of doubt, shame, and longing. But Jung emphasized that these emotions are part of the process. They act as trials, testing the individual, stripping away illusions, and shaping the soul. Just as myths tell of heroes tested in isolation, so too does the modern individual face their inner trial in the form of solitude. And this leads us to a deeper mystery. If loneliness is an archetypal calling, then what larger transformation is it guiding us toward? If loneliness is an archetypal calling, then what larger transformation is it guiding us toward? For Jung, the answer was individuation, the process of becoming whole. He argued that every human being carries within them a divided self, the persona, which is the mask shown to the world, and the shadow, which contains all the parts of ourselves we deny or repress. To integrate these opposites is to move toward wholeness. And strangely, solitude often provides the perfect conditions for this integration to begin. Think about it. When surrounded by friends or social circles, we are constantly tempted to wear masks. We adjust ourselves to fit in, to be liked, to avoid conflict. But when those social mirrors disappear, so too does the pressure to perform. What remains is the raw, unfiltered self. This is why Jung suggested that those without friends are sometimes closer to self-discovery than those constantly immersed in social life. Their solitude becomes a crucible where false identities are burned away. Yet this is not a comfortable process. Facing the shadow is never easy. It means confronting flaws, insecurities, and impulses that we would rather ignore. But Jung emphasized that without this confrontation, no genuine transformation can take place. Loneliness, then, is not just absence. It is the environment where the psyche quietly insists that we meet ourselves fully. At the same time, solitude can awaken forgotten potentials. Hidden talents, creative impulses, and spiritual longings often surface when the distractions of friendship are stripped away. Many great thinkers, artists, and mystics throughout history endured long periods of isolation, and Jung would point to them as living examples of the unconscious guiding individuals into solitude for a higher purpose. This raises an unsettling but fascinating question. Could it be that the very pain of having no friends is the signal that the unconscious is preparing us for a breakthrough, something we could not achieve if we were constantly surrounded by others? If so, then loneliness is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of an initiation into deeper layers of the self. But here we must wonder, what happens after this initiation? Does solitude eventually lead to reconnection with the outer world, or does it carry us into an entirely different kind of life? The question lingers. After solitude has done its inner work, does it isolate us forever? Or does it transform the way we relate to others? Jung believed the answer lies in individuation itself. Once a person begins to integrate their shadow and listen to their deeper self, they no longer approach relationships out of desperation or fear of abandonment. Instead, they begin to seek and attract connections that resonate with authenticity. This is why Jung warned against judging someone who has no friends as unworthy or incapable. Often, the absence of companionship is a sign that the psyche has withdrawn support from superficial ties. The unconscious is forcing the individual to pause, to shed false identities, and to discover a deeper ground of being. And when that ground is found, the friendships that emerge afterward are very different from those that came before. They are no longer about filling a void, but about sharing from a place of fullness. Clinical observations confirm this pattern. Many who suffer long bouts of loneliness later describe entering a new phase of life where they draw different kinds of people toward them. They no longer crave the crowd that entertains, but does not nourish. Instead, they find themselves drawn toward rare souls who can meet them in truth, silence, and depth. These new friendships may be fewer, but they are richer, carrying a sense of maturity that was not possible before the period of solitude. Jung himself compared this process to the myths of exile. Moses wandering in the desert, the Buddha retreating into solitude, Christ fasting alone. Each of these figures experienced isolation, not as an end, but as a preparation. Loneliness strips away illusions, burns off false attachments, and prepares the individual for a new kind of encounter with both self and others. And so, what appears outwardly as a social failure is in fact an invisible initiation. The psyche, through the painful absence of friends, is crafting the conditions for a rebirth. This is why Jung would say that loneliness is never meaningless. It is always pointing toward something, the possibility of becoming more real, more conscious, more whole. But this leads us to another question. If loneliness is a rite of passage, what lies on the other side of this transformation? What does the return from solitude actually look like? If solitude is a rite of passage, then what happens after we cross its threshold? Jung suggested that the one who endures loneliness without fleeing, it emerges transformed. This transformation is subtle at first, but profound in its consequences. The individual no longer depends on external approval to feel whole. Instead, they cultivate an inner security that reshapes the way they live, love, and connect. Consider how most relationships are formed. Often, they arise from unconscious needs, fears of being alone, desires for validation, or attempts to escape inner emptiness. But after a deep encounter with loneliness, these unconscious motives begin to dissolve. A person who has faced their own shadow learns they can survive without external distraction. From this discovery grows a rare kind of freedom. The freedom to choose relationships not out of need, but out of authenticity. Jung compared this rebirth to alchemy. Loneliness burns away what is false, leaving behind a purified essence. Out of this essence emerges a new capacity for connection. It is as if the soul, having endured its desert, now calls forth companions who reflect its true depth. Relationships that arise after such solitude tend to carry honesty, vulnerability, and spiritual intimacy. They are fewer in number, but immeasurably more significant. This echoes the archetype of the phoenix destroyed in fire, only to rise from the ashes renewed. In Jungian psychology, the fire is the loneliness itself, the painful stripping away of false selves. The ashes are what remains after the old patterns die, and the rebirth is the emergence of a self no longer ruled by fear, but guided by inner wholeness. But this rebirth is not only about friendships. It also transforms how a person relates to the world at large. Someone who has endured isolation becomes less reactive to external noise, less swayed by trends or judgments. They carry within them a compass that points toward authenticity. Others may sense this invisible strength as a kind of magnetism. Such a person does not chase connection anymore. Instead, they naturally attract those who recognize the depth they have cultivated. Yet even here, Jung reminds us not to grow complacent. Transformation is never final. The psyche continues its work, sending new challenges, new symbols, and new encounters to test and deepen the journey. Loneliness may return, not as punishment, but as another stage in the ongoing dialogue between the conscious self and the unconscious. And so we must ask, if the process is continuous, what ultimate purpose is the soul aiming toward through all these cycles of solitude and rebirth? So what is the ultimate purpose behind all these cycles of loneliness, shadow work, and rebirth? Jung would say it is nothing less than individuation, the process by which a human being becomes whole, integrated, and aligned with the deeper truth of the self. For him, loneliness was never simply a social condition. It was a symbolic state, a psychological and spiritual initiation that strips away illusion so the soul can finally encounter its own center. At this center lies something extraordinary. Jung called it the self, the archetype of wholeness, the inner core that unites all opposites. The self is not just our conscious identity, but the totality of who we are, including the parts we have denied, forgotten, or projected. When friendships fall away, when distractions vanish, it is often the self that calls us inward, asking us to reconnect with what is eternal. This is why solitude, painful as it feels, is never meaningless. It becomes the sacred ground where a deeper relationship is forged, not first with others, but with ourselves. And only from that foundation can genuine connections with the outer world begin. As Jung once remarked, loneliness does not come from having no people around, but from being unable to communicate the things that are important to you. The journey through solitude teaches us to discover those important things, to know what our soul truly values, and to prepare us for relationships where those values can be shared without masks. In this light, having no friends is not a curse, but a calling. It is an invitation to face the shadow, to discover hidden strengths, and to walk through the desert of the soul in order to find an inner oasis. And when this process has unfolded, the relationships that do emerge are no longer born of fear or emptiness, but of authenticity, creativity, and love rooted in truth. So if you or someone you know feels abandoned by friendships or weighed down by solitude, remember this. The absence of friends may be the psyche's way of guiding you to the most essential friendship of all, the one with yourself. From there, every bond that follows will carry the mark of something deeper, something real. Perhaps then, loneliness is not the end of the story, but the beginning of awakening. And before you go, don't forget to subscribe to my channel SYC Soul. Click the like button. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss upcoming videos, and share this with someone who needs to hear it today.